Imagine you're jamming with your buddies. The chorus is rocking, you're all sounding great, and the singer nods towards you. It's solo time. You're excited. You look down at the fretboard, ready to shred, and you ask yourself, what do I play? But that's exactly what you should do. Always ask yourself that question. Give yourself a goal with each phrase before you start the phrase by saying, what's next? This achieves two things. When you're thinking about the next phrase, you're leaving space between your phrases in your solo, which is actually a good thing. It's training you to lay back a bit, leave that breathing space in between phrases, and not play too much. And the second thing is that the next phrase you play will be far more interesting because you're playing with intention. You're doing something different. Now, when you ask yourself what next, you need to have a few ideas in your back pocket that you can reach for. And these are not necessarily complex things. It could be something simple like start with a bend, or play pentatonic with some slides, or get bluesy with the blue note, shift up the fretboard, try a repeating pattern, or target the root. Or it could be something more complex depending on the song, or even just the moment in the solo. It could be things like play double stops, use an arpeggio, hit a triad of the chord. Let's craft a solo together using this approach. The structure is these chords: B minor slash A, G, and then a quick D, A. And so I asked myself, what do I play? So let's start with one of the simpler concepts. Let's start with the bend. Let's do it Bonamassa style and start on the end of one, so just after beat one. Making it start not right on beat one is kind of cool. We can either start right before beat one or just after beat one. It's just a little more interesting, right? So if I counted that in, it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. You can see it's on the up right after one, the one and. A 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. The rest of that phrase is just B minor pentatonic, and it's just improvised. It's just a small little space. Sometimes we just choose a small little space and just play around with those notes. Those are the only notes I use, right? But just mix them up a little bit and it sounds more interesting. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Put a little vibrato on some of them too, that also helps. Now I ask myself, what next? And we can take a moment to do that, right? We don't have to play the next phrase right away. There's nothing wrong with leaving a couple beats or sometimes even a whole measure. It can depend on the song and the genre you're playing. And so let's say I ask myself, what's next? And I think, well, let's throw some blue notes in there. So I'm gonna look down, I'm gonna see, well, there's my B minor pentatonic scale, and where do I have a blue note? I've got one here. And I've got a sneaky one here too, right? It's the same note there. But sometimes I like to mix those two together and I get a really cool sound. So it could be something like this. So you can see how I'm mixing up those two blue notes. We had that one, we had that one. I'm gonna start on that one and slide up. Now I'm just thinking minor pentatonic there, right? Ooh, we got blue note, blue note. I like how those blue notes get mixed up. We hear it, it's the same one, but when we hear it in an unusual timing, right? Or we hear it repeated. I'm repeated on a different string, so it sounds ever so slightly different. It's kind of cool. It's kind of confusing, but in a good way. Okay, so I finished that phrase, and again, I just asked myself, what next? Or do something different. So I think, well, what could that be? Again, keeping with simple concepts for now, I could think, well, let me just shift up to the next pentatonic shape, which would be extension shape from there, and then the one above that would be shape 3, so I could shift through one and then the other, and then just play a lick on those notes. So this lick includes the blue note in shape 3. So I'm going to walk up to extension shape. Okay, so that's the box as you know it, right? And I'm going to keep shifting up because that was my plan for this phrase. So I'm going to shift up through the blue note. That's pretty sweet, right? That's the blue note in shape 3, triple stack. So I'm going to walk up there. And then maybe I descend there. And let's end on that note. That's a good note to end on, right? That's the root. It's always going to sound good. So that phrase is 1, 2. Give that one a bend. That's pretty cool. 1, 2. Okay, so now I've shifted up. I'm going to ask myself again, what next? Let's do something maybe a little more complex. What is the chord at that moment? That's the end of the phrase where it's going to go D, A. So the last chord of the sequence is an A, which means instead of hitting a root this time, why don't I hit an A note? So I'll end this phrase on an A to end this sequence. It's going to sound good because it's not the root in this case. It's going to sound like we're not quite done because we are going to go around again. So that last lick could be, let's see, maybe something like that. I like that better. Something like that. But the point is that that's the A, right? That's the, now how do I know that? Well, I just know the fretboard, right? So in that case, I'm not thinking about where that note is positionally in the shape. I know the root's there. In this case, I'm just thinking, where is an A? And I know that's an A, 14th fret of the G string. It's kind of like 2nd fret of the G string, right? So what's that lick? It was something like, I also like to double notes like that sometimes. Just doubling a note makes the lick last a little longer, and somehow it's a little more melodic. Like a lot of melodies that we sing in a verse or a chorus, we don't always change notes every single one, right? And yet guitar players always want to change the note after every single one. Sometimes don't change them. Same one. That's right. So let's put all that together. See if I remember. I've got the bend and a bit of minor pentatonic for the first lick. And it was end of 1. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Blue notes. Nice. Now we're going to go shifting up. 1, 2. Now we're going to end on the A to connect that phrase to the chords underneath. Or, honestly, just to answer the question, what next? Don't overthink the question, what next? Just think, what next? And what comes to your mind first is a great thing. For example, sometimes it doesn't have to be anything complex at all. Sometimes it could be just a dynamic or an expressive idea, like add some vibrato or play quieter. Maybe we do that next. Let's say we're going to play the next phrase quieter. Let's say that makes sense for this song. Well, I mean, it's nice to have dynamics in a solo anyway. So let's just go back down to easy shape here. I'm going to play some kind of palm muted kind of a thing with maybe some click in there. And again, I'm just limiting myself to a small space, especially for a phrase like this. This phrase is all about getting quieter because, again, that was my answer to the question, what's next? But also this one's all about just a cool rhythm, right? It's very few notes. Something like that. So now I could gradually get that phrase louder because I started real quiet. Getting louder. And I'm doing a lot of palm muting there to change the kind of character of the sound as well. Now, I ask myself, what's next? I need a next phrase, right? So let's say I start to gradually get louder. Again, we're talking about what we can do expressively now rather than just hot licks. So maybe I'll just make this next phrase louder. Maybe I'll move down a bit just to make it sort of growly, right? So it could be something like, I like to bend those minor thirds just a little bit. It's kind of more bluesy. Now again, what's next? Maybe if I can answer the questions quickly, sometimes you can actually connect phrases right away. Or you can even ask yourself what's next while you're kind of playing the previous phrase, while you've already answered the previous what's next, if you know what I mean. So maybe now we're trying to add more notes. We're trying to get more intense. Maybe we're going to play faster. Maybe we're going to subdivide, or maybe we're just going to climb up the fretboard using a longer phrase so that it sounds more exciting. We previously had a lot of space. Now, what's next? Let's not have so much space. I love ending a fast climb like that with a big bend, right? Because we had that quicker subdivided notes. Those are 16ths, I mean, rather than 8th notes, right? So they're twice as fast. It's ascending, so it's giving us that excitement. And then we end with this triumphant bend. That's a great bend right there. That's actually curious. That's a 1.5 step bend. I'm bending the B note up to a D, which is in that chord. B minor has a D chord. Now, I didn't think about all that when I actually played it. I was just visualizing the pentatonic shapes, but my ear told me when I bend that note, it's gotta be there, right? To fit the chord, it's gotta be the 1.5 step bend to harmonize with that chord at the moment, the B minor. And so again, I asked myself, what next? And let's say the answer this time is something more complex. We're gonna think about the chord underneath at the moment again, it's a B minor, and we're gonna play an arpeggio of B minor. So I'm gonna play this one. That's a cool arpeggio. You could think of this shape here as being a B minor. Remember cowboy D minor here? If you ever played acoustic cowboy chords, you might know D minor. It's just D minor moved up to E, F, G, A, B. There it is. And then the extension would go to that F sharp there. It's just a B minor arpeggio. So I got this phrase now connected with the previous bend. That's pretty cool. Give us some vibrato again. We want that expressiveness. And now let's say I ask what next and I want to do something more complex just to demonstrate it. How about we do some double stops? That's actually also a really good idea when you're getting near the end of a solo, because the double stops are going to sound bigger and more exciting. And the double stops here, I could just say, well, I'm just thinking that's, you know what? That's just from pentatonic, right? But it's also from a B minor bar chord. That's getting complicated. All those notes are just in the pentatonic shapes if you visualize them. And let's say one more. I got one more measure, so I'm gonna say what's next? Well, what's the chords in the last measure again, right? They were D, A. So let's try one more complex answer, and that's gonna be, let's play the triads of D and A. So there's lots of places I could play them, right? But I'm up in this area, so it makes sense to be not too far away. So I'm gonna do, also because I love that Keith Richards move, right? So how do I know that's D? It's a D, it's a D, it's a D. This triad shape always has its root here. Or, if you like, I always point out that the root is also there. We're not playing that D, but that is the root. You can find it there as a landmark. That's the same, right? Just up an octave. And the A is that, just like cowboy A. It's really the same. Now, all the tabs for this are on Patreon, and you can join that for 7 days for free, so I hope to see you over there. But let's hear the whole thing put together now. Now, the thing about this approach is that it's a very intellectual way of thinking about soloing, and there are some downsides to that. Like I said, we have to make sure that when we use this approach, we are playing expressively. One of the ways to do that is to say something with your solos. This video here will help you make whatever phrase you choose sound more musical, more natural.